Hello, everyone.
Hello.
And to everyone watching, welcome to the 56th Chicago International Film Festival. My name is Joy Norris, programmer for the Black Perspectives and After Dark sections this festival season. Joining me today in our Q&A for Farewell Amor is writer and director Ekwa Msangi.
Hello.
And one of the film's stars, Ntare Goma Mbaho Mwene. I hope I did that correctly.
Ntare Guma Mbaho Mwine. You got it.
Beautiful. Okay.
Thank you for having us.
I will practice, of course. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time and, of course, sharing this really wonderful film with the festival. There's so much to be said about it, but Ekwa, I would love to have you take us through the inception of the film and what sparked the need for you to tell this story when you did.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. We're really excited to be in Chicago with Farewell Amor, which started off as, well, I mean, it's inspired by a relationship of an aunt and uncle of mine who were married in the mid-90s, and uncle got a student visa to come to the States, came with every intention of bringing aunt and cousin soon behind him, and have been caught in this endless visa application rejection cycle, till today. They're still petitioning and still hopeful that one day things will change and they'll be together. And in the meantime, even though they've kept in touch and he sends money and he calls every weekend, and, auntie's built a house and my cousin's in college and all of those kinds of things, it has changed them, and it's changed them as people. It's changed their family dynamic. It's changed the outer family dynamic as well. And so just watching them over the years, just the idea of, well, what would happen if auntie finally got her visa and she was able to come? Where, at that point, where would they begin? So it was kind of the what if story that I wanted to write. And, it's just kind of been a pressing story in my mind for all of these years about what does it mean? And I think at the time that I actually took pen to paper was when there was just so much in the news and the media about immigrants and, the takers and the moochers and the thugs and the thieves and like all of that kind of, stuff about immigrants and who they are, and just thinking about my uncle and my aunt, my family, and like they're not those people. And the idea that we never get to think about what immigrants go through, what they have to give up in order to be together, not aside from like the separation part, but even when they are together, like what they're having to give up to do that in the small and big senses. So just wanting to say something different about immigrant people in this particular case, but at the core of the story, it's really just a story about separation and from people that you love. So it doesn't have to be by immigration. It can be by, military service. It can be by, people with hectic work schedules, by, all sorts of different things that relates to people across the board, and not just Africans who are applying for visas.
Yeah, you can feel the tenderness that you have for these characters. And it's such a wonderful thing, despite the things that happen. Of course, like Walter has his own life, right, in the country, because and it's understandable. Who can blame someone who's been separated from their family for over almost 2 decades? And I think you did a really beautiful job of presenting how people cope with these circumstances, what Esther kind of became, to deal with her circumstances, to continue hoping. And I'm curious, as you were going through like the cast, or the, not necessarily through the casting process, but as you casted and you were describing these characters to your actors, what were what was the language you were using to get them to understand these characters?
That's a great question. I mean, in our casting call, I think it was just sort of like the general description of the circumstances that, you know, that we find them in. And then when we were working together on the, you know, in pre-production, we thought a lot. I mean, we did a lot about just understanding the culture, understanding the war that took place in Angola. We did some sort of improv work on the kinds of conversations they might have had while they were away from each other, the kinds of decisions they would have had to make, you know, what happened the first time the visa was rejected, the second, the third time, you know, what, you know, and so in different groups, I did a lot of work with the actors on the backstory because I wanted the present story to be experienced sort of live, so to speak. I didn't want to go over that too much because I wanted them to be awkward and unsure and all the things because that's where they would be. I don't did I say things to you entirely that I'm not remembering about this character?
It's interesting that you talk about it being based on a true story of your family member, because you never discussed that.
Interesting.
I only learned about that when we started doing the press. So I was like, wow, interesting.
Huh. Sorry, I forgot. Yeah.
I guess maybe it was a decision to not, because something like that kind of information can taint, right? Could possibly potentially taint a performance. I don't know if that was a conscious decision, but
sure, of course it was. I mean, because this is also not about my uncle, really. I actually don't think my uncle's had an affair with anybody. He's actually quite religious. I certainly don't want to put that story out there. And, you know, and it's not a biopic. So I don't want anyone to feel like they needed to, you know, learn more about my family in order to be able to play the role, because it's not about them. It's just the circumstances that I borrowed in order to write this script. So yeah, it was totally intentional. Exactly
well, you are a brilliant filmmaker, so. So I am curious, what made you decide, or at what point did you decide that your characters were Angolan, and why? What informed that decision?
Yeah, the music. I wanted to use this music, this particular music and style of dance, because of the form that it is and the way that one dances to kizomba or semba, which are the styles that Walter's character dances to. There is no repetitious pattern to dance to those, like salsa or something, where you kind of have the same foot pattern over and over again. For both kizomba and semba, you actually really need to be connected and engaged with your partner in order to know which way they're leading you. And if you're not, you can't dance to it. And so I just thought that was an interesting metaphor for a couple that used to have this dance life, that used to be connected, and are now completely out of sync, quite literally, and are trying to find their footwork again. And I love the music itself, and I wanted to be able to showcase that, because it's unfortunately, mostly because of language barriers, is music that's so little known here, unless you're kind of in that community. Like, just more people need to know about kizomba and semba and kuduro, because it's beautiful music. And so I wanted to be able to use that. So that's why Angola. I've never been to Angola. My family's not from there. I don't speak Portuguese, so we did also have to. I had to make a case for why they'd be speaking English, because most Americans, unless they live abroad in an English-speaking country, don't. And even if they do, it's one thing to be out in the world speaking in English, but when you're at home, why would you speak English to each other, really? So, those are just kind of like creative things. But I did have the mom move to Tanzania because that is where my family is from. And that is a place that I could write about and, speak from in terms of the culture and what happens with religiosity and things of that nature. But it was the music. That's why.
It is a wonderful soundtrack.
It's an incredible soundtrack.
It is. It's just it's so uplifting. It's the kind of thing that's just like instant joy once you.
Is it going to be available to purchase or?
That was the next question.
So, we did actually have some people who were working on that, and then COVID happened, and I don't know if they're still working at the place that they were working and things of that nature. So it is something that we're going to be working on with our distributors now, IFC, to see what we can do. Because
seems like a no-brainer, because that's like soundtrack is so great, and everything's online now. It seems really easy to be able to have the playlist at least.
Yeah, I am happy to share it. I have the Spotify playlist.
Yes. Oh God. Okay, we'll drop that. Send it to me, and we can put it on our website.
Well, you gotta. This is my first time working with a director who actually create a playlist for you. She had like a playlist for each character. This is how detailed she was. It was incredible. So yeah, I don't know. You should talk about that too. Is that something you've done for other projects, or is that unique for this?
No, it was unique for this because so much of this was based on the music. And when I was writing it, I would listen to certain music for the character, because Walter has his music and Esther has her music. And so to kind of get into that space so that I could write from their perspective, I had their playlists. And it was great because I was able to offer it to the actors when they were preparing. Because it's such a big part of their world. And then I was also able to offer it to my music people and my editors and all of these people so that they could use it while we were putting the film together afterwards. And now offering it to fans who are interested.
Is that playlist still available? Like, is it still up?
It should be. Yeah, I haven't removed it. I'll resend it to you if you can't find it.
I found the link.
Right, I feel like Antari is like going to put it on for the background of our conversation, which would be wonderful. So, Antari, let me ask. Of course, you love this music. How are you using it to get into Walter?
Oh, it's. I don't feel like I was using it. It's like I teach at USC. And we did an exercise a couple of weeks ago where we just had the students pick like three of their favorite 3 songs that really moved them. And we just had them put headphones on and listen to the music. And we couldn't hear what they were listening to. But just watching them listen to the song was so riveting. It was just, so I didn't have to do anything. Because there was times we were driving in the cab and we'd be playing this song. What's that song? What's the name of that song?
Monarchy. I'm going to mispronounce it, but it's by Bonga Kwenda.
Yeah. Is this the song that Sylvia knows, that her mother that played in Dar es Salaam, that made everyone cry? Yeah, I'm very curious about that song.
What is it called? Because I have the playlist up.
Monarchy something. The first word is Mona.
Okay.
And that's a song that I found as I was researching, because as an immigrant, music was always very important. I mean, in my family, not just because my family enjoyed music, but it was for a lot of people, I think it's like relation to home, relation to culture, relation to, at that time in the 80s, I was growing up in the US and it was like a lot of apartheid music. Yeah, a lot of apartheid music and struggle music and, so learning about what was going on the continent and things like that. So I feel like for everybody I know, like we can place ourselves at certain times, the first date and the guy that I had a crush on and, whatever is all related to certain tracks, right? And so as I was doing the research for the film, there was someone brought up Bonga as an artist and how important he was to Angolans, especially Angolans who were in exile, because of the things that he spoke about in his well, as a musician, he's beautiful, but also the things that he spoke about was this longing and this mourning for home and for peace and, you know, that kind of stuff, and how people would just cry and get so emotional. So I wanted to include that in the song. I actually didn't know, I kind of put it in blindly, but I hadn't actually researched what he was saying in the song. And it wasn't until Jamie had done the research while she was working on the script and came back with the translation. And it was this, a father speaking to his child about, you know, leaving her behind and, you know,
wow.
being mournful of that. And I was like, oh, it's even more perfect than I thought.
Isn't
So then I had to.
You just connected. Like
yeah, I'm sorry.
Isn't that incredible how it just connected regardless of the language? It spoke so clearly.
It was so perfect.
Yeah.
And so then I had to translate all the music. So now I know what every single song in the film is actually talking about, so that, you know, I could be that specific with it.
That's beautiful. And I mean, that leads to just the close connection between Walter and Sylvia, even though it's not, they don't think it's there. Their looks betray them because they're so similar, right? Mm-hmm. Just in their observance of Esther and her in her devoutness, and just their responses to the things that they're very observant people as well. The responses to the world. I'm curious, how did you form, or did you know that these two characters, like father and daughter, that bond needed to exist unspoken? Or was that just something that
it would? I mean, that was my intention going in terms of like the actual delivery of it. I mean, that was all Ntare and Jamie, who, in their very strategic way of working and not working together. And Ntare can talk about what the rehearsal process was like with Jamie to prepare for that. Ntare.
Yeah, Jamie's, I mean, I was just stunned that this was her first job out of school, because she just seemed like such a seasoned professional and just sank right in. And I mean, I felt like I was learning from her. She was just like, she is really remarkable. So, I mean, it felt like at ease, you know. Sometimes you really have to work at trying to create some sort of connection, or you have to talk through stuff or whatever. But I felt like when we were together, it flowed, and it just felt comfortable and familiar.
Yeah. And you didn't spend much time working on backstory or anything with her.
No, I was fighting that. I must confess, I apologize if I gave you a hard time, but I was like, I don't need to do these improvisations. Like, we have stuff on the script we need to work on. Like, we don't need to work on stuff that's outside of the script. There's stuff in the script. So we get around the table and try to improvise like phone conversations, and I just like begrudgingly do it.
So you're a script purist. You're like, if it's on the page, it's in the film. Like, that's
there was just stuff that I still hadn't figured out on the page. That was still on the page that I wanted to work on before getting to stuff that wasn't on the page. And we had a very short window of time to sort of do all of that. So I was just trying to fight for the stuff that was on the page, but begrudgingly went to try to improvise and stuff that wasn't on the page. But of course, all of that feeds into the piece. So it's a testament to Ekwa for recognizing the full picture that we need to paint. Yeah,
absolutely.
And it was also, I think the two of you didn't. I remember you saying that she was kind of avoidant for even like while we were shooting, like she wouldn't kind of hang out or anything in between. And I think that had a lot to do with sort of building that distance.
Yeah, because we were doing dance class at the beginning, and I hadn't met her yet. But she was coming either before or right after my dance class. but she didn't even like. I thought she was coming from some other company or something. I had no idea she was part of the film.
Oh, wow.
And I tried to say hello, and I just realized, oh, maybe she's not involved in the project. And then I realized she's playing my daughter. I was like, oh, let me try harder then to say hello.
That is so funny because it's exactly what the characters are experiencing, this evasive teenager and this like cloying father.
Trying to figure out how to connect to them. And
yeah. It was beautiful. It's beautiful to watch.
Absolutely. I want to get to the title of the film, Farewell, Amor, and all the different ways that love kind of is expressed or experienced in the film. One thing that really spoke to me, and I'm curious to know if I just fabricated this, just looking for meaning, but in Walter's taking his sheets that he shared with Linda out of the apartment, and there's a moment in the hallway where he's about to take them to the trash, and he pauses, returns, puts them in the donation box, and then later, of course, Esther comes. She likes them; they're beautiful, and she returns them to the home, and this, ultimate inevitable blow up between them, they're on the sheets, they're on the bed, return to the bed. And of course, Walter knows the smell, the fragrance that is lingering, and loses it. I read that as, him trying to purge himself of the love, of that love. And instead of trashing it, because he still wanted to be friend, like he's holding on to like some, I guess, piece of hope in some regard, or at least maybe he wants to share that love with someone else. At least that energy can go to someone else. And then in Esther's reclaiming those sheets, she is reclaiming his love, or maybe reclaiming isn't the word, but picking up whatever is left of that love, unknowing, because that's what she has just wanted. So am I crazy, or is there something, is there meaning? And
I think that's beautiful. I'm going with that.
Okay. Yes. That was really great. That was a great memory.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're spot on. And I think that you actually are onto something that I might have subconsciously, tried to express, but I'm so glad that you got that, because it definitely is. It's a farewell to what was love, what seemed like love, or a certain kind of love, in terms of Linda, for sure. But for all of them, I think it's farewell to, it's like this idea of each other, idea of themselves, idea of, of America and what it's going to bring and what it's going to hold. It's a farewell to a whole number of things. And it's sort of like you have to let that die in order to actually have what's in front of you. And that's the struggle that they're having throughout the entire script, is like letting go of the crutch, the love that has been the crutch all this time. I love my husband, but what does that actually look like? You kind of don't know your husband, so in order to love your husband, you're actually going to have to let go of the idea of him, and let go of the idea of what your daughter's life is going to be, and all of those things. So for me, at least, that's what I was thinking. I don't know. That's an interesting question. What do you think, Ntari?
I wanted to ask you, because you just came up with this great tagline that I've seen, which is, sometimes the reunion is harder than the goodbye. Can you just unpack that, or how did you guys come up with that? Was that?
We have an amazing marketing team that thinks deeply. I mean, I think it's, that's kind of like the summation of of where we find ourselves, right? Like sometimes the work that needs to happen when you, in order to like to be together, to come together, is actually like a lot more than, and goodbye always seems like the hardest part, but it's actually, that might be easier, but maybe not, because like look what's happening with Linda and Walter. Like that's not an easy goodbye.
Yeah.
For either one of them. But it's not easy for any of them to say goodbye. But what is it compared to the reunion? I don't know.
I love that. I love that tagline. It's just so juicy. Like,
yeah.
This is really good.
Yeah.
Juiciness. Thank you.
So I do want to talk about Esther and her character, who is complicated, perhaps misunderstood, because she doesn't really know herself as well as the other characters. And let me just, again, maybe I was reading too much into it. She is in a lot of white in the beginning. And I wonder if that was just a nod to like her religiosity, her being cloaked.
Yes, we'll go with that. Indeed. It might have been subconsciously. I think it had more to do with just her
looking fantastic in white.
Tiny costume budgets and what was available at the Salvation Army when we shopped for her. But we were very particular about sort of having her being light, like what her color palette was, and what days it fell on. We did have to be very specific about like what she's wearing when, because we had those overlapping scenes. But and didn't want her to be wearing nothing but African print wall to wall, because I didn't think that would be true to her either. So it was a little bit of circumstance and budget, but we did want to have her in lighter colors, bright and light colors, as opposed to Walter, who, at least in the church scene, Walter was kind of wearing darker colors, and had his sort of taxi driver uniform look.
Yeah. I mean, Walter is like always dapper. So it's always nice to see him just like walking around.
Exactly.
So with Esther, I feel every character sort of has their arc, but it seems like she has the most prominent one towards the end. And this release at the end of the film, after their conversation, things are going well with Walter. She's been calling back to Tanzania, asking, I think, Sister Redempta, for help. And, Sister is like, yes, up your tithe and, give him some more money and we'll pray harder and blah, blah, blah.
Right there.
And I love that, the progression that we have, that moment of her questioning and of ultimately having this crisis of faith. And then it's like a break for her outside the church. She can't get in the church because it's not the church that she's supposed to be having this moment with. It is her husband. It is Walter. And instead of having his relationship that she's been told that she should have, him too, it's like the film ends with them in a friendship, sort of. And she's, if you could speak on that, how you wanted there, or was there an idea of what their relationship became towards the end, how Esther, changed?
Well, in terms of what their relationship became, we had always said that if there were a sequel to this and they weren't together, I think people would be like, okay, I get it. They really tried, but man, relationships are tough. And if we had a sequel where they were together, people would also be like, yeah, those people really tried. Like I could see they're working on things, like it could go kind of either way at that point. I don't think it was a sealed deal. Like people are not like, I think the only agreement that was, in my mind, the only agreement that was made at the end was that they agreed that they were going to try and that they were going to be present, and or at least try to be present and actually like engage each other. And so that climax moment at the church was important, where she ran back to the crutch that she's always been running to, and couldn't get in. And Walter's crutch has been Linda, and he'd been running to her all this time. And she shut the door there too. And so everybody they're forced to face each other. Finally, at least that's what I was intending. I don't know what your read was, Ntare, or how you felt about. I mean, you were actually in that scene with Zainab.
It's so interesting just to discuss the film like this, because sometimes, just Joy, your ability to articulate some of these scenes, you're putting into words things that I felt, but I hadn't put them into words. Mm-hmm. So it's so great to hear you interpret what I was trying, or a feeling somehow, or their mood or something. And I don't know if it's the same for you, Ekwa, because you wrote it, so I'm sure you had the thoughts in mind. But for me, someone who's more of a visual artist and not, the words don't come first usually. It's so just to hear you say these things, because it's like, yes, that's exactly what it was, and I hadn't really, articulated it in terms of Esther. The doors were closed for her at the church, and she had to deal with Walter, and the doors were closed for Linda. So it's all there, of course, but I hadn't articulated it quite the way you have. So thank you for putting that out. You should write an essay on the piece.
Oh, I'd be happy to, yes. And I'll be listening to the playlist as I do it.
Yeah, it's really great to hear, you put words to sort of these complex feelings and emotions that were happening at play. That sometimes it's hard to put words to, just like what music does.
Yeah.
Music can touch you in a way that, it's not a coincidence that song hit Ekwa. And the content of the lyrics were what she was writing about.
Yeah. So
I think there's, it's really interesting just to hear this, your interpretations. And,
yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, again, it's a well-made film. You can feel so much, and it's by way of your performances that just make it so palpable. It's visceral. Mm-hmm. And I'm really grateful. Like, there are no villains or anything. These are people. I know these people. So it's just wonderful to watch. And
they also point out that, in praise of both Ntare and Zainab and the fabulous actors that they are, that scene on the steps in front of the church was their first scene together. Like, that was the first scene we shot together. That was, Zainab had just literally walked onto set that day.
Not our first scene. That was the first day filming, right?
Yeah. Well, it was the third day filming for the company.
Yeah.
It was her first day. It might have been your second day. I can't remember.
Yeah. I felt like things were still trying to coalesce, because we had like a pizza delivery come like in the middle of a scene.
Oh,
we were still trying to work out things together, logistics. And there's a guy holding like a stack of pizzas in the shot.
I just imagine everyone going through their scripts like,
That was hilarious.
Right in. Yeah, that was day number one with all the tears and all of it. It was beautiful. That was a hard day too, because we were shooting on a live street and we weren't aware how active that street got at night. So
you did a lot of wide shots, but were you not able to use them because of continuity or
sound? Because It was really, really loud on that street there. And of course, you have a whole bunch of lights, so everyone was really curious. So everyone was coming by with their, carts and push carts and radio in the push cart to ask what we're doing and all sorts of things. But they were great, just in terms of like keeping their focus and being able to be right there. And also, just wanting, in terms of the editing choices that we made, just wanting to be like really close with that couple in that moment, because this was it. This was like the last moment, make it or break it kind of at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a few more questions, but I also want to address the audience. If you have questions, please just throw them in the chat and we will get to them with the time that we have remaining, just so everyone can take part.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, so much to say. And I'm lingering on Esther because of her, again, her evolution. I was proud of her. I really was. I was proud of her. Especially, going back to that scene where it's after the conversation on the church steps, and she's walking back into the apartment, but with renewed eyes. It's morning also. The light is coming through. It's like her first time in the apartment. And it's like she is, I won't say her old self, the woman who met Walter, but this new woman of who she is in the US.
Yeah.
And when Sylvia wakes up and she says, I did really well and they saw me. Mm-hmm. And Esther says, we see you. I'm going to tear up now because that was so, was that like how did you connect? Was that the intention in that scene of just being seen? Because of course we know like oftentimes immigrants are seen as, or unseen, right? Are invisible. I'm just curious about the connection of seeing in that moment.
You are good at this, Joy. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, in terms of acknowledging and like seeing people for who they are, I was born in the US, moved away when I was 5 and came back when I was 17, so around that same age. And my path is very different from Sylvia's story, but definitely felt that because I was an immigrant, people kind of like, oh, well, you have nothing to contribute, and whatever. Sure, great, that's nice. I mean, unless I had some sob story, there wasn't, people were like very quick to sort of like move on. And so being able to discover that she actually has thoughts or talents or, whatever was important for her in terms of her wider world, but I think also for her parents, because her parents have kind of been, it's common for every adult who has children, like we're doing this for the kids, we want a better life for our kids, right? So they've made all these choices all these years, to stay separated, to keep petitioning for Walter not to come back, for, Esther to finally make it because of the kids. But at the same time, there's a way that they've been kind of ignoring her because she's got these passions and these dreams and all these that Esther knows nothing about because she's been so focused on this. And Walter hasn't been able to know about because he's been away. And then as they've been together, they're kind of trying to avoid each other and be together and be polite to each other and all of these things. And Sylvia's kind of caught in the middle where she's been acting as the partner for her mom and providing subtitles for her dad to explain her mom. And so it's also a moment where they finally get to see her, and Esther in particular gets to see her as a full person and not just, the mission, the child that I'm suffering for. And that's, I I don't have kids, not human ones at least. I do have films, but for people who are parents, I mean, I think that's always a interesting thing to think about, you know, all the things that we do, that we say that we're doing for our kids, but how much of that is really for you, or, you know, not in like a horrible, selfish way, but, and I know the intention is always there, but I don't know that it always works out that way. So
I think that's also a big shift for Esther, because up until that point, I mean, she calls Walter like in a state of distress because she just found her daughter with this boy on their bed. Like, and she didn't think they were home. And this is a good Christian woman.
Yeah.
right.
Raised her daughter to be, you know, and that has got to, I'm sure that was one of the, you know, the biggest heartbreaks for Esther, to find her daughter in that position. Like,
Chuckling
oh she
with
must
some guy.
How dare you have fun?
that shattered her world. And so at the end, to come full circle and to say, we see you, it seems like I see you now, and, you know, and like embracing her, the wonderful things about her, not what she thought was the, you know, the wayward.
Right.
Yeah.
The protection, you know, and also her being a girl.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a way in which girls are protected and looked after, and that's very specific.
Yeah.
And she's preserved her virginity and her wholeness and her goodness until she could deliver her to her father and sort of be like, look, Walter, I did this for us. You know, I protected her. I kept her in this cage and I delivered her whole.
Oh man, yeah.
And Walter's like, she's fine. I don't see what the problem is. You don't understand. Yeah. So that's Esther. You know, I will also say, going back to one of your earlier questions, I think in terms of like the length of each chapter, Walter's is the longest. Esther's is actually the shortest in terms of her solo chapter. But we do get to see her unfolding, I think, maybe the longest, because we see it throughout. I mean, I don't know that we understand that we're seeing it in the beginning, because I think, at least from what I've experienced, see other people watch the film, is that there's a lot of assumptions about Esther up until the point where we get to her chapter of who she is and why she is. But it is an unfolding of kind of understanding her, and until we get to her chapter, and then we sort of see the behind the curtain of her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there is this really tender moment. It's either Sylvia or Esther's chapter where, I think it's Sylvia's, where they're in the kitchen. And we do have this idea of Esther at that point, up until that point, but they have a love for each other. Like there is resistance, obviously, in Sylvia being a teenager, being swept away from everything she knows. But Sylvia does say at one point to her mother, like, I don't want you to suffer anymore. I just don't want you to suffer anymore. And there's also a point, I'm forgetting if it's in the same scene of, oh no, it's a different scene where they're praying in the kitchen. And a part of what is probably a daily prayer is that father returns home, and then she has to correct it, and it's like, oh, from work, you know, like safely from work. And it's like, oh, so Esther probably had at some point this hope that he'll abandon whatever this terrible process is that's keeping us away from each other in America and come back to us. And so that did help me, because at some points I was like, oh, Sylvia's kind of annoying me. This teenage BS is kind of getting to me. But you do have to understand, like, she's experienced what this process has done to her mother and to herself. Yeah. So, I thought that was a really interesting thing. Like, oh, wow. She's been telling Walter one thing about, not wanting him to feel bad about being there and to like uphold his dream. And, masquerading as their train because she just wants them to be together.
Yeah.
I thought that was really wonderful.
Oh, thank you for catching that. You are smart, Joy.
Seriously, we've done a lot of
And I got
these interviews and stuff, but I think you've given more insight into the film than anyone else. I mean, more than
I'm
me
writing
in the film. So it's really,
oh, that means a lot.
yeah, yeah.
My student loans also appreciate that, so thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, again, I can go on and on about this film. I really just
thank you.
I love it so much, and I just want to watch it again because it's so good and captivating. But I will take a question from the audience. We have a question from Elizabeth, who asks, "What was the biggest challenge in making this film?"
Biggest. I don't know how to rank. I don't know how to rank the challenges.
That's real.
Many challenges in many different. Oh my God. I mean, raising the money is always a challenge. It actually was very pleasant compared to, other experiences my producer and I have had. And we ended up putting together a really great team. We had a very, very tight schedule for shooting it. And so, that shoot schedule, boy, was just like really intense.
How long was production?
It was 5 weeks. It was 21 days, 23 days over 5 weeks. But we were accommodating both Ntare's TV schedule and Marcus's TV schedule. And Ntare is in like almost all of the scenes. And so it was like, he didn't have any breaks. He was just working through until he was not. I mean, he literally worked, and I think we wrapped you at like 2 in the morning, 1 in the morning, and then at 6 in the morning he was on a plane to Chicago. So it was really like not a game. And then we went straight into post-production. I mean, we had been editing while we were shooting. I think there was a period I don't know if you know this entire, but we had shot everything else, and we had left the house scenes for like the last 2 weeks of the production. And the guy who was going to give us his house ended up being unreliable, and was doing these flip-flopping things and sort of holding us ransom. And so we lost the location like on Friday before we needed to shoot on Monday.
Yeah.
And so we had a weekend to find a new location, but it was too late to like plan everything. So we needed a location that looked exactly like our last location, at least in terms of the layout.
Mm-hmm.
So, we did that. And then, I mean, just the post-production was really intense because we had planned to get into Sundance, but we didn't finish shooting until the end of August and needed to submit a cut by October. And so we were just running and gunning, and we ended up having 2 editors work on that together. And then when we got into Sundance, then it was like, oh my God, we really have to finish this film. No Christmas. So, doing that and, and trying, of course, because we don't want to do like a shoddy job just to get to Sundance. We wanted to give it everything that we could give it. So, I mean, I will say, yeah, we had all sorts of challenges because which production doesn't, but we also had a really, really amazing team. I mean, the cast was incredible. The crew was incredible. Our post-production, just like all of our team was just so upbeat and so excited, about the project from the beginning, and all of our exterior support system as well. So that by the time we got to Sundance, we were exhausted, but also just like boosted up by all of these people who were just like so happy to have seen us make it. to that. And, you know, we had been there the year before looking for money. So it was literally 2019, January, we were at the festival talking about, like, we're going to be here next year with the film. And there were all these people who were like, that's crazy. Nobody does it. And we're like, you clearly do not know us. So many times during production, we're like, why did we say that? This is such a bad idea. But we did do it, and it was really quite something. You know, when we had our premiere, I think that was the first time I got to just like sit, and my body literally just like gave up, and I had a cold. I was like falling apart. My poor, like, one of the production managers was just like handing me tissues, like, "Are you all right?" Like, my body is so exhausted at this point.
It could have been COVID. Looking back,
it probably was. I do not disagree at all, because it was that too. But anyways, production was exciting, but challenging throughout, for sure.
Yeah, and Tari, I have to ask, what was it like being, as Equa described, in so many scenes, having such a heavy load like that? How do you take care of yourself, you know, keep yourself going?
No, it was thrilling. It's everyone's dream to be, you know, to be challenged and have great material and to be, you know, just going nonstop. I didn't have half the challenges that those guys had, you know, because I just had to worry about myself. But we had the only the only challenge, really big challenge for me, is we just had our baby, our second child, who was 2 months old.
Oh,
yeah. So when my first job, my daughter was born. You know, the first you treat differently, and I went off to Chicago to shoot, and my wife was like, "We're gonna have to stay here with the baby. We can't get on a plane." But the second one, I was like, "I just got this job. I was filming in New York." She's like, "We're coming."
She's like, "Get me out of here."
The baby wasn't even 2 months. We were just like, "It doesn't matter. Just put her on the plane."
When she grows up and hears this, she's like, "Really, y'all? Really?
We'll be fine."
Yeah. So my daughter didn't travel for the first like 8 months, you know, keeping them, you know. But this one, she was on the plane, like. So the only hard thing for me was, like, you know, we would wrap at 2 a.m, but then I'd come home and, you know, the baby would be up all night, so it was just challenging trying to juggle both the personal and the professional, but it all served each other in the end. So it was really great, and I wouldn't have done it any different. It was so great to be able to. I'm grateful for production to have made it possible for me and my family to stay together, because, you know, they could have easily said, "We can only afford a studio." There's no way. But you can't come with your family. So I'm grateful for these guys to make that possible, because it would have been a big strain on my family if I had to leave them behind. There's no way that would have worked.
Yeah, it was really, really wonderful. It was really great.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to speak to us here at the festival. And again, I have to say thank you for allowing us to program your film. It is just a heartwarming film. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
Thank you. We're so excited to share it with everyone, and hope that I don't know how many more days it's showing here, but we are releasing in December 11th, and excited to be able to share it with the world then. Thank you so much for your support.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Of course. And to everyone who is watching, thank you for joining us, and take care of yourselves. Bye.
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you.